Beneath Idaho's rugged mountains and along its wild rivers, legends whisper of hidden fortunes left behind by miners, pioneers, and outlaws. From lost gold in the Sawtooths to forgotten caches buried deep in the forests, Idaho's land holds secrets that have resisted time, waiting to be found. Today, we journey through some of Idaho's most intriguing treasure legends, stories that still ignite the dreams of fortune seekers across the world. Grab your gear, fuel your imagination, and let's uncover the hidden riches of the Gem State. These legends, none are more tantalizing than the accounts of gold robberies. Shrouded in uncertainty and woven into the fabric of history, one such enigma is the saga of the John Doc Noble robbery, etched into the annals of time more than a century ago, near the rugged town of Whitebird, Idaho. The details of this event, obscured by the passage of years, blur the line between fact and fiction. While some records suggest it occurred between 1862 and 1868, evidence points to a likely date in August 1864, amidst the bustling gold rush era of the Salmon River. John Noble, a seasoned trader, navigated the treacherous trails with his pack train, threading through the wilderness between the prosperous gold town of Florence and the bustling port of Lewiston. Laden with riches, his convoy carried the lifeblood of the gold rush, a fortune estimated at $75,000, though whispers hinted at even greater wealth from individual miners. Despite the ever-present threat of outlaws and indigenous raids, Noble's previous journeys had been uneventful, fostering a sense of security that proved deceptive. With a retinue of 20 men to manage the stock and 12 vigilant guards, he embarked on what would become his most fateful expedition. Winding northwest toward the Salmon River, Noble's convoy traced the rugged contours of the land, with the imposing Seven Devils Mountains standing sentinel to the west. Swift and lightly packed, his train raced against the clock, driven by the promise of profit and the urgency of commerce. As dusk descended, casting shadows across the canyon, Noble's party halted near Slate Creek, pitching camp amidst the rugged beauty of the wilderness. Little did they know, the night would unfold with a darkness far deeper than the shadows that danced upon the canyon walls. Noble, a rugged man with a weathered beard, anticipated reaching Whitebird by nightfall the following day. However, fate intervened before he could escape the clutches of the river canyon. In a place now infamous as Robbers Gulch, the tranquility of the journey was shattered by the sudden onslaught of 8 armed assailants. With terrifying speed and precision, the attackers descended upon the train, their shouts and gunfire ripping through the air. Caught off guard, Noble's guards and packers scattered in panic, leaving the pack animals to stampede in confusion. Amidst the chaos, 6 of Noble's men fell to the merciless barrage of bullets. As the highwaymen seized control, they rifled through the cargo, seizing not only Noble's gold, but also the valuables entrusted to them by individual miners and businessmen. With the loot secured, the bandits swiftly vanished into the rugged terrain, their identities cloaked in secrecy. In a bid to evade pursuit, the gang leader ordered the gold to be buried along the Salmon River, hastening their flight into the labyrinthine Seven Devils Mountains. Despite their efforts to cover their tracks, the relentless pursuit by the citizens of Whitebird forced them into a deadly confrontation. A fierce battle ensued, resulting in the demise of 7 outlaws, but the whereabouts of Noble's gold remained elusive. Despite exhaustive searches of the rugged landscape, the treasure remained hidden, becoming an enduring enigma of the Wild West. Years later, a chance encounter in Coulterville, California, shed new light on the mystery. Elmore Jacater, a young man seeking adventure, befriended an old prospector named Charlie Yarnell. As Yarnell's health declined, he confided in Jacater, revealing tantalizing clues about the long-lost treasure. But even as Yarnell's cough worsened, his secrets remained guarded, leaving Jacater to grapple with the tantalizing possibility of unlocking the final chapter of the elusive golden treasure. Facing his mortality at nearly 80 years old, Yarnell made arrangements for the inevitable. Aware of Jacater's wealth from prospecting, he proposed a deal. Upon his death, Jacater would inherit a map leading to a cache of buried gold in Idaho. Yarnell claimed that while reports stated they had only taken $75,000, there could be over $100,000 or even more buried in 3 separate locations near the Salmon River. Initially skeptical, Jakater entertained the notion but urged Yarnell to focus on recovery rather than surrendering to despair. Yarnell, however, feared recognition and retribution if he ventured back to Idaho, haunted by the fate of his former partners. His fixation on avoiding detection had kept him from retrieving the gold for nearly 3 decades. Despite Jakater's ignorance of the noble train robbery, Yarnell's detailed recollections and vivid descriptions convinced him of the story's authenticity. Yarnell's claim to have escaped the massacre by hunting game ahead of the group lent credence to his account. As Yarnell's health deteriorated, Jakater sought medical aid, but the old man's condition worsened rapidly. In exchange for the map, Yarnell pleaded for a dignified burial, a request Jakater honored upon his passing. Discovering the map among Yarnell's belongings, Jakater considered pursuing the treasure, but deemed the endeavor too costly. 2 years later, however, fate intervened as Jakater found himself in Idaho once again, contemplating the tantalizing possibility of unlocking the secrets buried within the rugged terrain. While idling in Boise, Jakater stumbled upon various accounts of the historic Noble Pack train robbery, corroborated by remnants of records he found in the local Historical Society library. Though lacking in modern efficiency, government maps of the time lent credence to Yarnell's crude sketch, aligning with a canyon labeled Oldenorf by Yarnell, albeit unfamiliar to Jakater. Undeterred by discrepancies, Jakater provisioned himself and embarked into the wilderness with 2 burros and a trusty steed. His exploration led him to a short tunnel, not marked on Yarnell's map, suggesting subsequent human activity in the area. Undeterred, Jakater pressed on, guided by Yarnell's cryptic descriptions and a peculiar rock formation resembling an Indian's face. Venturing deeper into the canyon, Jakater located the markers described by Yarnell, indicating the spot where Noble's gold was rumored to be hidden. However, his solitude was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of 2 rough-looking strangers who appeared to take a keen interest in his activities. Initially dismissing them as fellow prospectors, Jakater grew suspicious as they scrutinized his excavation sites. Their pointed inquiries hinted at ulterior motives, revealing their knowledge of the elusive loot sought after by outlaws decades prior. Jakater's confusion deepened as the strangers' references to the robbery clashed with his own ignorance of the event. Their exchange left Jakater with more questions than answers, his curiosity piqued by the enigmatic encounter in the rugged Idaho wilderness. Moreover, if you're seeking what we're after, you're in the wrong canyon altogether. Those outlaws made their way into the Seven Devils before stashing the loot from the Noble train. With that, they offered no further insight into the matter, but opted to spend the night in close proximity to Jakater's camp. Early the next morning, they loaded their gear, saddled their animals, and rode further up the canyon, seemingly headed west toward the mountain range. Later that afternoon, while digging a hole, Jakater heard the unmistakable bray of a burro echoing up the canyon, indicating that the supposed prospectors had not left the area and were keeping watch on him. Sensing potential danger, Jakater retrieved a revolver from his packs and concealed it on his person, prepared for a confrontation. He filled in the holes he had already excavated and approached the red-stained vein on the canyon floor, beginning to dig with caution. Nightfall found Jakater stealthily making his way up the canyon to the intruder's camp, which he located less than half a mile away. The following day, he emerged from his makeshift shelter late and resumed digging at the base of the wall, under the quartz vein. After excavating further, he encountered an obstruction that halted his progress. Upon closer inspection, he uncovered fragments of a rotted leather pannier containing decaying buckskin sacks, spilling forth small gold nuggets. Mindful of the lurking danger posed by the intruders, Jakater concealed his excitement and continued working, discreetly gathering the treasure into a bucket. Under the cover of darkness, he returned to camp, where he cautiously separated the gold from the debris. Estimating his find to be around $30,000 worth of nuggets and gold dust, he buried the treasure in a heavy canvas sack and disguised the site before returning to his shelter. The following morning, Jakater lingered in camp before returning to the excavation, digging deeper, but finding nothing more of value. By afternoon, he filled in the hole and leveled it with the ground, concealing any evidence of his discovery. Over the next 2 days, Jakater cautiously continued his excavation, mindful of the possible presence of the two intruders. Despite his efforts, he failed to uncover any additional caches, prompting him to abandon the search and pack up his belongings due to dwindling supplies. Making camp at the mouth of the canyon on the Salmon River, he decided to pan out the finer particles of gold from the debris, confirming his earlier estimate of a small fortune. That afternoon, Jakater braved the river crossing with his stock, navigating the swift current to reach the opposite bank. As he paused to dry his wet pants, rifle shots shattered the tranquility of the scene, narrowly missing him and signaling imminent danger. Recognizing the assailants as the same men from the canyon, Jakater swiftly drew his 6-gun and returned fire, incapacitating one of them while the other fled into the brush. Taking cover behind his horse and burros, Jakater maintained his position, exchanging gunfire with the remaining assailant before issuing a stern warning. The surviving hardcase, fearing for his life, emerged from hiding and confirmed his partner's demise. Jakater, wary of potential legal entanglements, promptly departed the scene, venturing eastward into rough terrain and eventually finding refuge in the Boise Bassin. From there, Jakater continued his journey as a nondescript prospector, eventually selling his gold after traversing several states, ensuring his safety and preserving the secrecy of his newfound wealth. From then on, he blended into the ranks of hopeful prospectors traversing the land. He held onto his gold until he journeyed through Utah and into Colorado. Upon entering New Mexico, he transitioned into the mercantile trade and eventually settled down, marrying and raising a family in the lush Rio Grande Valley. Despite occasional musings about returning to unearth the remaining treasure, Jakater never acted upon them. His ventures in business proved lucrative, rendering such pursuits unnecessary. As the years passed, Jakater's longing for the hidden gold remained a nostalgic tale. He passed away in 1958 at the age of 84, leaving the mystery of the buried treasure unresolved. Speculations abound regarding the precise location of Noble's loot, with conflicting reports suggesting it could be concealed in any one of several canyons that feed into the Salmon River from the west. Complicating matters further, many of these canyons have been subjected to early mining activities, clouding the trail of evidence even further. The stagecoach to Salt Lake City crested a small rise between rocky outcroppings. 4 hidden bandits opened fire with bullets and shotgun pellets. The lead horses fell, causing the stagecoach to crash against the rocks. The stage toppled onto one side, and the rear horses scrambled up again. 2 unmasked bandits emerged from the rocks, weapons ready, but their attack was complete. 4 passengers were dead, 2 were dazed, the shotgun guard was dead, and the driver was slightly wounded and semi-conscious. The burly, black-bearded bandit leader ordered the gang's horses brought in. They looted over $100,000 in gold from the passengers and another $80,000 in coins, raw gold, and bullion from the express box. Lacking extra horses to carry the loot, they loaded it onto their saddle horses, slowing them down. They considered using the stage horses, but abandoned the idea as the animals would be recognized. After half an hour, the gang rode north. The holdup occurred 4 miles above McCammon, Idaho, on the Portneuf River, soon known as Robber's Roost. Once the bandits left, the driver recovered and helped the dazed passengers. The leader was Tom Updike, he said. They found 3 rideable horses and set out for McCammon, then just a stage station. Arriving at sundown, they found a crowd of prospectors and freighters. Preparations to pursue the bandits began immediately. Updike and Guinness were notorious bandits, and their attack wasn't surprising. "This will be their last job," vowed a posse member. That night, 20 armed men camped at the holdup scene. The driver helped repair the stage by firelight, and they drove it to the station. The 5 bodies were buried elsewhere, their location now unknown. At daylight, the posse picked up the bandits' trail, following it quickly. The gang left the stage road near what is now Incom, heading north through the mountains. They stopped briefly to rest their tired horses near Fort Hall. The posse found this campsite by sunset and continued tracking through the night, resuming at first light. The posse soon realized the gang was making slower progress and was only a few hours ahead. Confident they would soon catch the outlaws, the posse hurried on. After crossing the Snake River below Idaho Falls, the trail led them west of Market Lake, Roberts. Despite their proximity to the gang, they had to camp a second night without catching them, halting just above Godden Station, now Tarleton. Scouts found nothing until near daylight, when they saw faint smoke over the edge of Mud Lake, a short distance north. Quickly mounting, the posse raced toward the smoke before sunrise. By then, the bandits' horses were so exhausted they could only walk. Believing themselves safe, the outlaws were surprised by the sudden arrival of the posse. The bandits hastily mounted their already saddled horses and fled, but bullets whistling around them made escape doubtful. As the posse closed in, they saw the bandits throwing sacks or parcels into the lake. Riding close to the water's edge, the bandits tossed more objects in, lightening their saddles for a desperate run west. The posse, on fresher horses, gained on them. 2 gang members were shot dead, falling from their saddles. Updike and Guinness in the lead escaped into the lava badlands and disappeared. Despite efforts to find them, the posse eventually gave up. Returning to the bandit camp after midday, the posse argued about whether the sacks were thrown into the lake off a projecting point or slightly beyond it. None of the sacks were found. They had sunk instantly, likely containing the stage loot. After thoroughly inspecting the shallow shoreline with no results, some posse members believed the loot had been buried en route to Mud Lake or near the final camp, as the weight of the gold would have burdened the horses. However, most believed the loot was in the lake, thrown in by the bandits hoping to retrieve it later. Since that day in 1865, many tales have persisted about the vanished loot in Mud Lake. The surviving bandits never returned for it. Updike was caught in another robbery in Boise Basin and hanged less than 3 months later. Guinness met his end in a shooting brawl in Virginia City, Montana. The details of the robbery and pursuit are well documented, but the final scene is set in a surreal landscape of natural wonders. This volcanic field, with its disappearing rivers and creeks, caves and basalt formations, seems designed to guard lost treasure forever. In Idaho Falls, Roberts, and the dying town of Tarleton, many stories circulate about the lost gold. Mud Lake itself is a curiosity, with cracks through which its waters disappear, gradually shrinking over the years. Into the lake vanishes the considerable annual outpourings of Camas Creek. In the years following the robbery, several men made half-hearted attempts to find the treasure. In 1885, B.C. Nettleson began a systematic search, spending over 20 years looking for the loot. He eliminated many potential hiding spots and focused on a cattail-covered area by the lake. However, after boasting about his imminent success in a saloon, Nettleson was confronted by 2 armed men claiming the gold belonged to the express company. Suspecting they were outlaws, Nettleson played it safe. The next morning, Nettleson returned to the lake before dawn, hiding his rifle nearby. When the 2 men arrived, he pretended to give up the search. They watched him closely, but he didn't reveal his discovery. After Nettleson left, the men, dressed in old clothes and hip boots, searched the lake for 3 days without success. Nettleson kept watch and ensured they left the area. Returning to his search, Nettleson couldn't relocate the object he had found. Frustrated, he spent the fall hunting and prospecting in Boise Basin. In 1892, he met Orba Duncan, a strong worker who joined him in the search. They continued probing different points of the lake. When Nettleson's gold ran out, Duncan grub-staked them, and they became well known in the area for their quest. Others occasionally tried to find the treasure, but most didn't persist. One year, Nettleson and Duncan prospected in Boise Basin and returned to Mud Lake with their findings. Nettleson, aging and slightly crippled, died on the Salmon River in the winter. Duncan returned to Mud Lake in 1896 and found a group uncovering an area they believed was once underwater. They explained that the lake had been receding, and the spot they were digging was likely where the gold had been thrown. Duncan knew the lake was shrinking, and that dry seasons left former mudflats permanently exposed. The point Nettleson believed held the treasure was over one of the deeper holes in the lake and never dried up. Duncan thought the new project there was a waste of time. His judgment was confirmed when the treasure hunters reached bedrock, finding only volcanic deposits instead of gold. Disappointed, the hunters left, but they were soon replaced by others, often disguised as duck hunters. These duck hunters arrived with wagons full of camping and treasure hunting equipment. They shot a few ducks and poked around the shallow waters, but it was clear their main interest was searching for gold. The lake was teeming with waterfowl, and the cattails provided cover for predatory animals, including bold lynx cats that invaded Duncan's camp. Duncan avoided other treasure hunters, working mostly in the early spring and summer when he wasn't being watched. The lure of the vanished gold was too deep in his blood to ignore. Sometimes he had to take jobs to earn money for his searches, but he always turned down offers of financial help. In June 1901, Duncan searched Nettleson's Old Point for the 50th time. The water was only about 6 inches deep until it dropped sharply into a deeper hole. Probing with a steel rod, he hit an obstruction. Assuming it was just another stone, he dug it out and discovered an oblong, heavy object covered in black mud. It was a bar of solid gold. Making sure he wasn't being watched, Duncan buried the bar under the ashes of his campfire. That afternoon, he found 2 more bars, smaller than the first. Despite days of eager searching, he found no more gold. He created a small circular dike to pan the mud but found nothing valuable. To conceal his method, he replanted the cleared areas with cattails. When other hunters showed up in the fall, Duncan left for Roberts, riding his burro and armed with his rifle. He moved on to Idaho Falls without delay. After taking a day coach to Boise, he sold the 3 bars for just under $25,000. At 38 years old, Duncan wrestled with whether to invest the money or continue hunting for the Mud Lake gold. In the end, Duncan bought a farm in the Snake River Valley. This let him continue treasure hunting while having the farm as a backup. That year, he couldn't resist returning to Mud Lake, but he found nothing and went home disappointed. Realizing he needed to make the farm productive, Duncan took a 3-year break from treasure hunting. During this time, he married a widow with 4 children, who managed the farm well, allowing Duncan to resume his search. When he returned to Mud Lake, others were searching extensively because word had leaked about his find. Despite trying to keep it secret, his sudden wealth made people suspicious. Some men offered to join him, but he turned them down, saying he doubted more treasure was there. Nevertheless, he went back to Mud Lake with his 12-year-old stepson, Hal. After leaving Roberts, Hal noticed they were being followed. They hid and saw 5 men with pack mules trailing them. Duncan and Hal slipped away to the north side of the lake and set up camp. Pretending to dig along the shore, they felt the tension of being watched. After 4 days, they left and saw a dozen riders with equipment. That night, they saw campfires where they had been digging, and by dawn, men were digging near the mouth of Camas Creek. Duncan found it amusing but frustrating, as it ended his hunting that year. Some men, thinking Duncan had more gold, ambushed him and Hal near Roberts. They searched them, found nothing, cursed Duncan, and left. Duncan and Hal went home. A week later, the other hunters left the lake. Despite threats from those who believed he knew where the loot was, Duncan insisted he didn't know its location. Over time, the story of the Mud Lake treasure faded, and fewer people searched. Yet Duncan never gave up. He often slipped away at night to continue searching, sometimes with Hal. When Hal was 20, they found a dozen large nuggets while panning a gravel bed. They also found a fragment of a leather bag with a pinch of gold dust, though it was far from where Duncan believed the loot was. He theorized high water had washed the bag there. During World War II, Hal joined the army. After the war, they used a mine detector to search the lake but found nothing. Duncan then tried dragging a large magnet across the lake, recovering some gold nuggets but nothing substantial. In the center of the lake, the magnet got caught in a crevice and was lost, ending their search for good. Duncan knew more about the vanished gold than anyone else. He spent his life hunting for it, covering the area thoroughly. While others gave up or thought the treasure was a myth, Duncan was convinced it was in or near the lake until his death in 1928. In the summer of 1942, another treasure hunter announced in Roberts that he had found the gold. Claiming to have secret information, he hired men, leased equipment, and spent thousands on a large-scale excavation. He believed Territon was not on the old emigrant road, and that Godin's station of the 1860s was farther west near the lake's lower end. Despite all the excitement, his project failed like the others. He was convinced he would find the stagecoach loot and turned down offers from those wanting to join him. His attempt was the last major effort to solve the century-old mystery. In Idaho, Stories about the bandit loot in Mud Lake are common, especially in Idaho Falls and Roberts. In the ghost town of Territon, locals believe the treasure is still in the lake or on the shore in the old Lake Phil. Many have searched for it, but it remains undiscovered. Orba Duncan is the only person known to have found any part of the treasure, and he recovered only a small portion. In the late 1830s, before the California gold rush had sparked a nationwide frenzy, the value of their find wasn't immediately clear to them. They collected the nuggets as souvenirs and continued their trapping expedition. It wasn't until they returned to St. Louis with their haul of beaver pelts that they learned the true worth of the yellow pebbles. Decades later, Elmer Nastran retraced the steps of these trappers, driven by stories of the untapped gold. His tenacity paid off when he managed to recover $15,000 worth of gold from a single pothole despite breaking his leg in the process. The gold that remains is believed to be buried under rock and gravel, a hidden treasure waiting to be uncovered by those daring enough to follow in Nastran's footsteps. The story is rich with the rugged spirit of the American frontier, blending the allure of gold with the harsh realities of life in the wild. While the fate of the remaining gold is uncertain, the legend of Nastran and the Snake River Canyon continues to capture the imagination of treasure hunters and history enthusiasts alike. The gold nuggets discovered by the trappers in 1840 were of little value to them at the time, as they had no real way to trade or sell them. A few people bought the nuggets out of curiosity, but the general lack of knowledge about gold's true worth is hard to comprehend today. Though gold had been discovered and mined in the deep Southwest years before, with a padre in Southern California, obtaining some from an Indian as early as 1832, there was no excitement in the United States over the potential riches hidden in the vast Rocky Mountains. For the trappers, their fortunes were tied to furs, which were rapidly becoming scarce. They didn't view gold as particularly valuable. Even the renowned Kit Carson, who found gold while on a trapping expedition, thought little of his discovery. When the three trappers brought their gold back in 1840, it created no stir, and their discovery was largely forgotten for many years. One of the trappers, John Schumann, sent 3 of the nuggets to his 16-year-old sister in Illinois, who later became Isabel Trial. He detailed the location of the potholes where the gold had been found. These nuggets were eventually appraised at $20 each. In his letter, Schumann described the canyon and the surrounding country, noting that the potholes were large, rounded, and half filled with the curious yellow pebbles. He speculated that if gold ever became valuable, a fortune could be found in that canyon. However, what became of Schumann himself remains unknown. In 1870, Isabel Trial's son, Robert Trial, returned home from college for the Christmas holidays, bringing his roommate, Norman Estelle, with him. Mrs. Trial shared with them the story of her older brother John, the family's adventurer, and showed them the letter and nuggets he had sent her years earlier. By then, gold rushes in the West were old news, but the young men were eager to explore the Snake River Canyon in search of the potholes. In July 1871, they made their way to the Snake River and, without much difficulty, found the potholes containing gold nuggets. Their adventure, as Robert later recounted, was rather uneventful. The two collected about 40 pounds of gold by simply picking out the largest pieces. Neither of them knew anything about panning for fine gold, despite having brought the necessary equipment. Their work was abruptly interrupted one afternoon when 2 prospectors rushed down the canyon, warning of an outbreak of Bannock and Shoshone raids in Idaho and Wyoming. Trial and Estelle quickly packed up and joined the prospectors, who helped them navigate the treacherous terrain. The 4 eventually made it to Salt Lake City, where the young men sold their livestock and took a stagecoach and train back home. The gold they had recovered was enough for both to start their own businesses. Trial opened a general merchandise store. Unfortunately, the lean business years of 1877 and 1878 bankrupted Trial, who was now married with 2 children. Believing he could easily return to the potholes and recover enough gold to rebuild his life, he borrowed money from his mother and headed west once more. However, the canyon's obstacles seemed even more formidable this time. After 3 weeks of arduous travel, he finally reached the area where he believed the potholes were located. But despite days of searching and examining countless natural potholes in the solid rock, He found nothing, not even a speck of gold. Discouraged and out of supplies, Trial returned to his home in Illinois, empty-handed. 5 years later, Elmer Nastron, a cousin of the elder Mrs. Trial, returned to Illinois after spending 15 years in the far west. By then, Robert Trial had successfully re-established his store and was doing well. Nastron soon learned about the story of the pothole gold in the Snake River Canyon, Robert's initial success in finding it, and his puzzling failure to relocate it. This tale sparked Nastron's curiosity, and by 1887, he found himself in Lander, Wyoming. There, seasoned frontiersmen recounted the story of 3 trappers who had discovered pothole gold on the Snake River before 1840, an account strikingly similar to the one Schumann had detailed in his letter to Mrs. Trial nearly 50 years earlier. Armed with all the information he could gather from both Mrs. Trial in Illinois and the old-timers in Wyoming, Nastron outfitted himself with a riding horse and 2 sturdy mules and set off for the Snake River. His journey took him through the Rocky Mountains and the Wind River Ranges, and then over the Gros Ventre country to the canyon. Once there, Nastron encountered all the obstructions he had been warned about. Like Robert Trial before him, he was forced to exit the canyon multiple times, detour, and re-enter the Snake River Gorge. Nastron suspected that Trial's failure might have been due to erosion, possibly a frost-induced rockslide that had concealed the potholes. When Nastron reached the area where he believed the potholes to be, he kept a close watch for any signs of natural events that might have covered them. In one spot, he discovered that the southeast rim of the canyon had sheared off, burying what could have been a solid bench under thousands of tons of rock. Though he considered the arduous task of removing the debris to test the original bench, he ultimately decided against it. Nastron continued downstream for 10 more days, panning as he went, but found no trace of gold. Convinced that he had left the pothole region, he reluctantly returned to the site of the massive rockslide and set up camp. After carefully studying the chaotic mass of debris, he chose a spot where the rock cover was thinnest and began clearing it away by hand. After digging down about 20 feet, he uncovered what appeared to be an extensive rock bench, which encouraged him to continue working. However, the task of removing the heavy stones to a suitable piling place became overwhelming. After a week of backbreaking labor, Nastron was on the verge of giving up. He was now dealing with massive rocks, some weighing tons, which he had to gopher around. Deciding to give it one more day, Nastron hadn't worked an hour before he found the first rounded pothole. It was dry and filled with broken stones, but beneath them, the pit, about 4 feet in diameter, contained gravel. As he cleared away the debris, he spotted large gold nuggets in the pothole. Nastron carefully picked out several nuggets with his fingers, but realized that he would need to carry the gravel to the river's edge to pan it properly. Using a heavy canvas sack from his supplies, he made 3 trips to the river, where he panned the gravel and recovered nearly as much fine gold as he had from the large nuggets. The one pothole yielded a total of $15,000 worth of raw gold, an astonishing amount, especially considering the hole's shallow depth. That night, Nastron lay awake, wondering where the gold in the potholes had originated. He speculated that, over eons, it had been washed in from a source that, if discovered, might lead to a mother lode containing unimaginable riches. The next day he removed more rock, uncovering another pothole, though this one produced less than $5,000 worth of gold. Despite 2 more days of hard labor, he failed to find another pothole in the area, so he began examining the old avalanche, which spanned about 400 feet in length and 50 feet in width. Realizing that he had started in the least promising spot, Nastron moved upstream about 100 feet. After removing another layer of stones, he found a small pothole just 10 paces away. From this hole, he extracted about $2,000 worth of gold. At this point, the solid rock bench seemed to curve, causing the stones above it to pile up even higher. Determined, Nastron attacked the mass, moving rocks to one side of his hand-dug trench until the pile became almost too tall to manage. For 5 long days he toiled, carrying stones to the lower side of the trench, until he finally uncovered another pothole. This pothole held even more gold than the last, with larger nuggets and coarse gold deposits. From this deeper pothole, Nastron recovered an estimated $20,000 worth of gold. Once he had cleaned it out, he faced a tough decision. Either move stones from a depth of 30 feet or attempt to dig another open-top tunnel into the avalanche. He chose the latter, intending to dig another 8 or 10 feet. However, this decision nearly cost him his life. After working for little more than an hour on the new trench, the walls on either side began to collapse. Nastron heard the rocks sliding toward him and tried to escape, but he wasn't fast enough. When the slide ended, he found himself pinned under massive rocks, racked with pain. He drifted in and out of consciousness throughout the afternoon, eventually realizing that he couldn't rely on anyone else for help. He would have to save himself or perish where he lay. With painstaking effort, Nastron began removing the smaller stones, but the enormous rock trapping his left leg was immovable. He started the slow process of wedging small, flat rocks under one edge of the boulder, gradually lifting it until he could drag his leg free. To his dismay, he discovered that his leg was broken above the ankle. His body was badly bruised, and his head was covered in lacerations. At the break of dawn on July 21, 1865, a stagecoach rumbled out of Virginia City, Montana Territory, heading toward Idaho with 7 passengers and $86,000 in gold bullion and dust aboard. This stage, bound for San Francisco, would soon become the scene of one of the bloodiest robberies and richest bandit hauls in the history of the Wild West. For most of the passengers, it would be their final journey, while for all but one of the outlaws, it marked the end of their criminal road. By the time it was over, the gold would vanish, becoming yet another lost treasure legend of the Old West. Charlie Parks, a 35-year-old tobacco-chewing bullwhacker from Kansas, was the driver of the ill-fated coach. Parks, who had worked for Overland for years, was known as a reliable hand. Among the passengers were James B. Brown, a saloon keeper from Virginia City, heading to Salt Lake City for medical treatment; Jess Harper, a Confederate veteran on his way to Sacramento to reunite with his family; Sam Martin, a gambler carrying a gun and gold, bound for a Nevada mining camp; L.F. Carpenter, a tall, frail man with a ticket to San Francisco; and a Mormon couple, Mr. and Mrs. Andy Ditmar, returning to Utah after a trip to Bannock. However, one passenger was not who he seemed. Fred Williams, a quiet and unassuming man, was the inside man for the outlaw gang. Williams had secretly gathered information about the large gold shipment and was prepared to signal his accomplices when the stagecoach reached Sawtooth Station near Fort Hall. The other 3 bandits, Brocky Jack, Big Dave Opdyke, and Willie Whitmore, were camped along the Ross Fork, just a few miles away, waiting for Williams' word. Brocky Jack, the mild-mannered yet dangerous leader of the group, was a seasoned outlaw. Big Dave Opdyke, a former Idaho sheriff recently recalled for misconduct, had connections that proved useful. Willie Whitmore, quick-tempered and trigger-happy, had already left his mark on the territory's graveyards. The 4 bandits had joined forces in Boise City in May of 1865, aiming to make their fortunes along the unguarded stagecoach routes. After a narrow escape from the law, including a reported drowning that Brocky Jack was happy to let the rumor mill spread, the group decided it was time to move on. With the Boise City Vigilance Committee cracking down on lawlessness, the outlaws knew they needed to act fast. By the end of May, the quartet left Boise City, heading east toward Idaho. On the road, they plotted the Portneuf Canyon robbery. They set up camp near the Sawtooth Station, where Williams was dispatched to Virginia City to gather intel on the gold shipments. Meanwhile, Brocky Jack and the others scouted the stage route, eventually finding the perfect spot for an ambush a few miles south of what is now Pocatello, Idaho. In a narrow canyon filled with willows and brush, where the road wound alongside the shallow Portneuf River, Brocky Jack, the 26-year-old leader, decided, this is the place. Brocky Jack, Opdyke, and Willie Whitmore meticulously reviewed their plans for the holdup. They gathered large boulders and stacked them out of sight, ready to block the road. Willie Whitmore, a crack shot armed with a new repeating Henry rifle, was tasked with shooting the lead horses if the stage driver refused to stop. Once all the details of the robbery were worked out, the 3 bandits returned to their camp at Ross Fork, near Sawtooth Station, where they waited for word. On the first day out, the stagecoach crossed the Ruby Mountains and reached Corral Station, near what is now Dillon, Montana. The route continued to Pocatello, Idaho, by the Union Pacific Railroad. By the evening of July 25, 1865, the fourth day of travel, the stagecoach arrived at Sawtooth Station near Fort Hall. After dinner, Fred Williams quietly slipped out and headed to the outlaws' camp. He arrived after dark, bringing news that exceeded their expectations. "There are 2 strongboxes on the stage," he said, "and there's so much gold in them they could hardly be lifted during the overnight stops." The bandits were ecstatic. They whooped with joy, passed around a bottle of booze, and updated Williams on the robbery plans. He then returned to Sawtooth Station before anyone noticed his absence. July 26, 1865, the day of the robbery, dawned as a perfect summer day. The hot July sun beat down on the narrow canyon, the faint hum of insects filling the air. A lark song echoed down the canyon as the 3 masked men crouched in the willows, nervously waiting. In the distance, they heard the sounds of snorting horses, jangling trace chains, and the clattering of iron-tired wheels on stones. The horses came into view, slowed at the stream, and then the coach dipped down the incline, crossed the stream, and climbed the bank, making a sharp turn before coming to a sudden stop at the rock barrier across the road. Sam Martin, one of the passengers, poked his head out of the coach door but quickly ducked back inside. A shot rang out, and Martin's aim was accurate, unfortunately. His bullet grazed Whitmore's left hand, taking off the tip of his index finger. Whitmore shouted, "It's a trap!" and chaos erupted. In desperation, the driver, Parks, tried to swing the horses sharply to the left, aiming to break through the willows exactly where Procky Jack was concealed. Jack rose from his hiding spot and, with cool precision, fired his double-barreled shotgun, killing the 2 lead horses with a shot to each of their heads. Some of the buckshot hit Parks, with one pellet striking just below his left eye and another in his neck. Parks wisely jumped from the coach and took off running. The loss of his finger drove Whitmore into a rage. He opened fire on the coach with his rifle, blasting shot after shot through the thin side panels. 2 passengers, Brown and Williams, scrambled out and fled into the brush, while the deadly rifle fire forced the others back inside. Procky Jack ran over, wrested the rifle from the crazed Whitmore's hands, and the shooting abruptly ceased. Jack ordered Opdyke and Whitmore to cover him as he approached the coach. "Come out with your hands up or we'll blow you out," he shouted. Silence greeted his command. Jack yanked open the door. "My God, they're all dead," he exclaimed. At that moment, attention turned to Williams, who staggered out of the brush, his arm shattered. Without a word, he sat down near the coach. Ignoring him, the others quickly set to work looting the stagecoach. Procky Jack and Whitmore rolled the 2 heavy strongboxes out of the boot and let them crash to the ground. Whitmore used the emergency axe carried on the coach to smash open the treasure chests. Inside, they found 15 glistening bars of gold, each stamped with Montana Assayers and Retort, 360 Oz. 2 large leather pouches filled with dust and nuggets added to their incredible haul. Whitmore added several more pounds of gold dust and nuggets that he had taken from the passenger compartment. Jack quickly estimated that their haul amounted to over 460 troy pounds of gold, which they would split 4 ways. As they made their way out of the canyon, the gold-laden bandits nearly rode right over Parks, who was hiding in the brush. Once the outlaws were out of sight, Parks hurried back to the stagecoach, where he found Brown already there, struggling to pull Carpenter from beneath the bodies. Parks, badly wounded, could offer little help. Tragically, the others in the coach, Mr. and Mrs. Andy Ditmar, Jess Harper, and Sam Martin, were all dead. Brown cut loose the dead horses and made Parks and Carpenter as comfortable as possible. Late that afternoon, he reached the Miller Ranch station with the riddled stagecoach, carrying the dead and the wounded. News of the brutal crime and senseless slaughter spread quickly, stirring up the vigilance committees of the West like never before. The boldness and defiance of the robbery infuriated the committeemen, who were ready to hang every bandit involved. The bandits were quickly identified. Parks had seen Procky Jack and Opdyke as they rode past his hiding place, recognizing them immediately. Brown positively identified Fred Williams and Willie Whitmore. The insurance company offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of the stolen bullion, and the hunt for the outlaws was on. Willie Whitmore was the first of the bandits to meet his end. Arizona lawmen gunned him down while he resisted arrest during a drunken brawl. Less than a week later, Fred Williams met a similar fate, hanged from a strong branch of a Colorado tree by the Colorado Vigilance Committee. David Opdyke managed to evade capture a bit longer. After hiding his share of the loot, he headed along the Snake River toward Boise City. Near Glenn's Ferry, he traded his saddle horse and $300 for a team and wagon. On August 17th, Opdyke, now disguised with a heavy beard, arrived in Boise late at night. He tied his team in a dark alley near the home of a dear friend, Ruth, who slipped out under the pretext of borrowing coffee from a neighbor, but instead betrayed him for the $10,000 reward. At daybreak, a tired and half-asleep Opdyke left Ruth's house and headed to the alley where his team was tied. 4 men, hidden behind his wagon, jumped out and overpowered him. Before he knew what was happening, he was hogtied, tossed into a wagon and hauled out of town. Just a few miles out of Boise near Syrup Creek, the committeemen stopped and prepared for their grim task. They unhitched the team, propped up the wagon tongue with a short timber, and retied Opdyke's hands and feet. They set him on one of the horses, led him under the makeshift gallows, and placed a noose around his neck, tying it to the end of the wagon tongue. According to a district court recorder who was present, Opdyke refused to utter a single word. The horse was let out from under him, and Opdyke was hanged. Brocky Jack remains the mystery man of the Portneuf Canyon robbery. His fate was never fully determined. Some believe his body was found in the Columbia River, while others claim he was seen in various places in the years that followed. Some historians speculate that Brocky Jack may have ridden with Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch, while others think he was the man killed in a poker game in Lordsburg, New Mexico, in 1878. As for the gold bullion from the Portneuf Canyon robbery, its whereabouts remain a mystery. Perhaps one day, some lucky individual will stumble upon a fortune in glittering gold hidden in Portneuf Canyon.
From within the hidden depths of verdant foliage, a pair of unwavering eyes observed the advancing carriage on the Lemhi Valley Road in northeastern Idaho. With its southward trajectory, the vehicle appeared to be a modest 2-seater buckboard crowned with a sturdy roof. 3 teams of horses were harnessed to this peculiar contraption, with 2 men occupying the front seat alongside the driver and 2 more nestled behind them. Curiosity piqued, the vigilant observers scrutinized the buckboard, their bodies frozen to the earth as the conveyance drew near. It was evident that this stagecoach was in a frenetic hurry, driven by some pressing purpose. What could possibly warrant the utilization of 3 horse teams for such a seemingly lightweight load? Typically, a single team would suffice, or at most 2 when the roads were muddied. Perplexed, the hidden pair exchanged a knowing glance, their attention captivated. "Good heavens!" one of them exclaimed. "It must be gold from the Salmon River mines." In an instant, they sprang to their feet and retreated to a small glade where their horses patiently grazed. Swiftly tightening the saddle cinches, they mounted their trusty steeds and veered off the road, skillfully concealed by nature's embrace. As the sound of the approaching stagecoach grew louder, their impromptu plan took shape, driven by a newfound determination. Racing forward, their singular focus centered on seizing the precious cargo at gunpoint. Arriving at Birch Creek, near the present-day Lone Pine, they followed its course downstream towards the crossing. Here, the creek sprawled wide, its current meandering merely ankle-deep. Each man positioned himself on one side of the narrow road, after cleverly concealing their horses amidst the brush that lined the creek. Crouched in anticipation, they fingered their trusty 6-shooters, rifles within easy reach. Their minds danced with visions of a swift and effortless acquisition of immense wealth. Alas, no prepared pathway awaited them at the ford. The gravelly banks sloped gently into the shallow stream. Merely 10 minutes had elapsed since assuming their positions when the telltale sound of the nearing stagecoach reached their ears. The stagecoach emerged from the distance, its pace slowing as it approached the creek. With a gentle descent, it ventured into the shallow waters, proceeding at a leisurely walk. As the horses reached the level ground, the 2 assailants rose, their faces exposed but armed with deadly 6-shooters. "One false move and you'll meet your demise," one of them shouted, while the other called from the opposite side, "If he doesn't get you, I surely will." The driver, gripping the leather reins tightly, pulled back to bring the stagecoach to a halt. Unfazed by the situation, he confidently declared, "All right, gentlemen, you won't find anything of value this time. We're merely transporting mail sacks, unlikely to hold any treasures." "Perhaps not, but what about those boxes beneath the sacks?" one of the bandits retorted suspiciously. "Your setup seems rather dubious, driver. You don't need 6 horses to carry mail sacks. We'll have a peek inside those boxes, and maybe your passengers are carrying hefty purses." "You on the back seat," the partner commanded. "Toss down those boxes at your feet." The passengers appeared to comply with the order, but chaos erupted in an instant. A low command was given, and all 4 passengers swiftly brandished pistols, spewing flames and bullets. Their rapid response proved fatal. The bandits on both sides of the road had already taken aim, unleashing a barrage of bullets upon the stagecoach. With their revolvers emptied, the assailants fell, replaced by carbine rifles. In the initial exchange of gunfire, 2 passengers fell victim to the violence, while the driver and the remaining 2 were wounded. Startled by the gunfire and the driver inadvertently releasing the brake, the horses bolted forward, propelling the stagecoach into a frenzied escape. Gaining 100 yards, with the occupants no longer shooting back, the stage almost got away. But 2 accurate rifle shots dropped the leaders stone dead. The 2 teams piled up on them, breaking out the tongue to which the forward chains were fastened. The buckboard smashed over on the right side, spilling cargo, dead bodies, and the wounded men. The latter leaped up and took off running down the road. Breaking off shooting, the bandits watched the men disappear over a far rise. In no hurry, and calling laughingly to each other, they got their horses and rode to the piled-up wreckage. 3 heavy wooden boxes had been thrown out with the mail sacks. When broken open with rocks, they were found to contain gold bars. Most of the bars were stamped with the name of a mining company. The bullion might have been shipped down the Gilmore and Pittsburgh Short-Line Railroad running between Salmon City and Gilmore. This was often done with the shipment picked up in Gilmore by stage and carried quickly south to Idaho Falls for transshipment. Elated over their golden haul, the bandits turned their attention to the dead bodies. But there was no gold dust on either. They were not miners, but armed guards accompanying the bullion shipment. The discovery astonished the bandits. Now they understood why desperate resistance had been made. The bullion had been guarded by 4 men because it ran into a huge sum of money. The bandits paid no attention to the wounded horses still threshing about the wreckage. Less concern was given to the fleeing men. They knew the wounded trio would have a mighty long walk to the stage station at Mud Lake, Territon, to get help. The road was quiet, as the railroad surrounded it, leaving only a few shipments of gold to be transported by wheels. The bandits, caught up in their exhilaration, believed they had nothing to fear. Little did they know the stolen bullion was valued at a staggering $350,000. The immediate challenge was how to transport the heavy gold bars. Realizing 2 men couldn't carry even 1 box, they decided to hide their loot. Making multiple trips, they carried a few bars at a time downstream to a wooded area. Taking their time, they searched for a natural depression, concealed the bars, and covered them with soil. They carefully erased their tracks, ensuring no evidence remained. Each bandit kept 2 gold bars, weighing approximately 20 pounds each, making their saddle horses bear an extra load of 40 pounds. Still under the illusion of having ample time, they proceeded further downstream. As evening approached, they settled by the riverbank, boiling coffee and preparing a meager meal using the last of their supplies. Their main topic of conversation was where to go to hide out until the hue and cry over the robbery abated. Then they would return with pack animals to haul away the rest of the buried loot. What they didn't dream of was the fact that destiny was ganging up on them to cut their careers as bandits abruptly short. The driver and the 2 surviving guards managed to get about 5 miles down the road. There, overcome by weakness from loss of blood from their wounds, they fell by the wayside. Then along came a freight train of 10 wagons and trailers belonging to Oscar Hedrick. On finding them, he halted and heard the account of the bloody robbery. A light wagon, used as an auxiliary supply trailer, was cut out, teamed up, and sent down the road to take the wounded men to medical help. Mounting up 4 of his helpers, Hedrick proceeded to the robbery scene. It was dark then, but the mess in the road was cleared off, and 1 wounded horse shot as an act of mercy. Hedrick didn't consider trying to overtake the murderous bandits. They'd had plenty of time to flee many miles from the scene. Then one of his men discovered a faint flicker of firelight downstream in the timber. Mounting up again and quickly losing sight of the fire, Hedrick and his men walked their horses downstream. The blaze came into view again with a light wind that had started rising. Dismounting well away, the five slipped close enough to see the crude camp in a glade and two saddled horses. Hedrick couldn't imagine the bandits being in that camp. Only two had been seen at the robbery, but that didn't mean others weren't somewhere out of sight. It could be a large gang. Moving up and keeping behind cover, Hedrick called out, "All right, you in camp. Identify yourselves." Believing themselves safe from pursuit for many hours at least until sometime the next day, the bandits were startled, to say the least. They also lost their caution, leaping up from prone positions on the ground to open fire at the sound of Hedrick's voice. Hedrick's widely dispersed comrades retaliated with equal swiftness, returning fire upon the bandits. One of the marauders, with intentions of seeking refuge behind a nearby tree, advanced a few steps but met his demise, pierced by multiple bullets. Sensibly, the other bandit ceased his shooting, so as not to betray his location with the flash of his pistol, and made a hasty retreat for cover. The gunfire ceased momentarily, allowing for a brief respite. Hedrick recounted overhearing the surviving bandit tersely call out, "Hey Alex, are you all right?" Regrettably, no response emanated from his partner. However, Hedrick called out to him, "You are encircled. Surrender would be your wisest course of action." A minute or so elapsed before an answer emerged, a flurry of galloping hoofbeats that rapidly receded from the vicinity of the creek. Emboldened by this development, the five men cautiously advanced toward the campsite. There they discovered the lifeless body of the fallen bandit, alongside remnants of their meal, a coffee can and skillet. Hedrick and his comrades then tactfully withdrew to the road, carrying the deceased bandit with them. His final resting place lay a short distance away, discreetly concealed from view. The wagon train came to a halt as Hedrick and his comrades ventured down the creek the following morning, their curiosity piqued. To their relief, the tracks revealed the presence of only two bandits. Hedrick's mind raced as he pondered the whereabouts of the abandoned or buried bullion, confident that the fleeing bandit couldn't have taken it along. Following the tracks diligently, they stumbled upon the deceased bandit's horse downstream, its saddle and bridle still intact. It appeared that the surviving bandit had initially intended to claim the beast, but ultimately set it free. Unperturbed by the escaping bandit's trail, Hedrick focused on unearthing the precious bullion. The mining companies on the brink of losing their fortunes would surely reward handsomely for its recovery. Alas, despite their exhaustive search, not a single clue to the hidden stash came to light. The subsequent day, a small posse arrived from the south, prompting the wagon train to proceed to Gilmore while another group set off for the scene of the robbery. Yet both teams failed in their attempts to track down the elusive bandit, losing his trail amidst the treacherous Beaverhead Mountains. It was suspected that he had crossed over into Montana. 3 weeks later, a man of average height, donned in rough miner attire but armed with a cartridge belt and six-shooter, stood at the bar of a Salmon City saloon. Suspicion arose within the bartender as the man handed over a small, jagged piece of gold as payment for his drinks. The bartender discreetly sent a message to the local law enforcement, convinced that the chunk of gold had been crudely hacked from a larger piece. The deputy sheriff arrived, and the swamper pointed out the stranger. With a demeanor that exuded toughness, the stranger caught the attention of the deputy, who observed his every move. The stranger then proceeded to another saloon, where he revealed yet another piece of roughly hacked gold. Joined by the town marshal, the deputy trailed the man to the livery barn. They caught up with him beneath the glow of a hanging lantern at the archway. "Hold on a moment, sir. We would like to have a word with you," called the deputy. The whiskered man swiftly turned, his right hand inching toward his holstered gun. "Yeah?" he snarled. The deputy wasted no time. "Where did you acquire that gold?" he demanded. "That's none of your business, you lawmen," snapped the stranger, drawing his pistol and striking the town officer with a grazing shot. However, the stranger never got the chance for a second shot. The deputy swiftly fired 2 bullets into his abdomen. Dropping his smoking weapon, the man staggered briefly before collapsing unconscious. The livery barn worker rushed out from the ticket booth and aided in carrying the wounded stranger inside. He then hurried off to fetch the doctor. More officers arrived before the doctor, who examined the stranger. Shaking his head, the doctor delivered grim news. "He doesn't have much time," he remarked. A thorough search of the stranger's pockets yielded several more pieces of gold, all crudely hacked from a larger chunk. The lawmen also discovered his saddle roll, which had been concealed beneath hay in the horse's manger. Inside the roll, they found a gold bar bearing the name of a mining company, providing evidence that this was the surviving bandit who had eluded Hedrick and his men at Birch Creek. Interrogated, he was reminded of his dwindling time and pressed for the whereabouts of the remaining bars. With a feeble grin, he replied, "Buried deep in the earth, the safest place in the world." He adamantly refused to divulge any further details. However, as his life slipped away rapidly, he relented and provided a statement disclosing the robbery's specifics. Yet each word weakened him, and his final mutterings concerned the loot. "It's hidden by the creek where my partner met his end," he uttered before passing away. The bandit was laid to rest the following day in the Pioneer Cemetery atop a gentle hill. A team was promptly dispatched to retrieve the bullion, but returned empty-handed after a fortnight. It was presumed that the dying man intentionally misled them about the cache's location. An intriguing aspect of this treasure lies in the mining company's tight-lipped response to their loss. They swiftly enforced a code of silence, refusing to acknowledge any misplacement. No explanation was provided then or in subsequent years. However, the members of Hedrick's wagon train, the stage driver, and the surviving guard shared the tale, causing it to circulate throughout the region, only to eventually fade away. The crossing where the robbery occurred is south and a little east of a roadside stop called Lone Pine, which in turn is about 2 miles north of where Pass Creek runs into Birch Creek. Lone Pine will not be found on road maps, but it shows on forest maps of the Targhee National Forest and is in northern Butte County. But a word of caution to treasure hunters: the old road crossing is on privately owned land, hence permission is necessary before you can conduct a search.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.